Hey guys, Pro1701 here, and today I'm going to be ranking the Legend of Zelda games from worst to best. Now I'm only going to be ranking the ones I've played, and the ones I've played at least substantially. Like I go from the Zelda games I can't stand, and there are some, to the Zelda games that I absolutely adore. And I just recently beat Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild for the first time, so I'm really excited about talking about those. Now, there are 13 Zelda games I've played total that I've played a substantial amount to rank, most of which I've actually beaten. At the bottom of the list in 13th place is Phantom Hourglass. I hate this game. I didn't really like the touch controls. I adjusted to them. They were okay, but I didn't really care for them. I would have preferred to have an option for a traditional control scheme. That's going to come up a lot in this video. But I hated having to redo that one temple. I forget what it's called, but I hated it. You're constantly having to go back there, redo it. It just gets monotonous, tedious, irksome. There was one boss fight on a ship I remember really hating. I literally broke my imported limited edition DS over this game. I got so mad at it, I just threw the whole thing one time. I was younger then. And it was a like navy blue one. I imported it from Japan. I loved that DS. And so the game gets a lot of hate just because of that. And then again, I hated redoing that stupid. It's just an awful game. It's an interesting idea. Nintendo, I always give them credit because they try to innovate. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you get a Virtual Boy. Phantom Hourglass is a Virtual Boy. I've never played Spirit Tracks. You know why I've never played Spirit Tracks? Because Phantom Hourglass sucks. It's awful. In 12th place on the list. In 12th place is Majora's Mask. I hate Majora's Mask. I do not understand why people like this game. Anytime this is someone's favorite Zelda, I have to question why. I start subtracting IQ points. I mean, not seriously. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. They like what they like. But I can't stand Majora's Mask. It is literally one of the most disappointing games I've ever played. Coming off of Ocarina of Time, which I very much enjoyed, and I was there when it came out in '98, I got Majora's Mask release day one. I'm like, a sequel to Ocarina of Time? Yes, please. And I hated it. I hate the mask thing when you're having to put on the mask to become other creatures. I hated the 3-day time span. I never like having to redo something I've already done in a video game. That pisses me off highly. Like, so wait a minute. You mean I have to go back in time and redo stuff all over again? No. No. So immediately this game was on my crap list. Like, I hate this game with such a passion. It is one of the most frustrating games I've ever played. One of the two most disappointing games I've ever played. The other being Metroid Other M, which also was god-awful. But I hated this game. I will never play this game. I still own it, but I own it to own it. I don't own it to play it. It is garbage Zelda. It has a darker atmosphere than most Zeldas, which I will give points for. And I like the fact that Ganon is not in it and that it's a different antagonist. It'll get you a couple points for that. But for the actual game itself, yeah, it sucks. I hate Majora's Mask, adamantly. Uh, Coming in at number 11 is Skyward Sword. I also hate this game. The motion controls make it god-awful. Now, I haven't played the Switch remaster. I just recently got a Switch, and I might play it eventually. But I hated the motion controls in this game. I never could beat the first castle boss, which is what Girahim, the really goofy-looking villain guy. I don't know his name. Like that very first battle you do with him, I must have played it 20 times. I could not beat it. This is someone who has beaten Zelda 2 The Adventure of Link talking here. I couldn't beat it. And it was all because of the motion controls. Now, I don't have very good hand-eye coordination. I just don't. So that could be part of the problem. But because of that, it turned me off to the whole game. Now, I actually like the game's graphical style, that kind of painting look it has to it, like a nice watercolors or oil painting look. I love that. That's a beautiful art style. And it's neat to have kind of an origin story for the Zelda series. But the fact that the gameplay sucks, like the motion controls, and again, that part of that's just on me, I'm not very coordinated, was awful. just ruined the whole game for me. And I couldn't get that far into it because I was so frustrated after about 20 times of dying that I just gave up. The only consolation was that this game had been given to me as a gift from a friend, so I didn't actually pay anything for it at least. But I hated it. It's again another disappointing Zelda game. Minish Cap is only this low because I haven't played it much, but it's never actively pissed me off. I got a little ways into it, not too far into it. Yo. Okay, cool beans, buddy. I'll see you shortly. Minish Cap, I never really got that far in, but I did enjoy it. It was a fun game. What little bit I've played of it, I liked it. It's on my Wii U. I have it downloaded. I keep meaning to go back to it now that I finished Breath of the Wild. That's probably the next Zelda game I'm going to tackle is go back and give that one another shot. I liked it. It had a beautiful art style. I liked the sprites. It looked good. I liked the idea of it, the mechanic of shrinking down and things that normally aren't that dangerous suddenly become very dangerous. I've heard the final battle takes a huge difficulty spike, that it gets really hard at the end. But yeah, I just don't have a lot to say about it because I haven't played it much, but it's never actively made me angry like the other games I've talked about. So it kind of falls here in whatever place we're in at the moment. And next on the list is Link's Awakening. Pretty much the same thing as Minish Cap. I've played on it a bit. I played, I think, the original Game Boy and the Game Boy Color version of the DX version of it. I never played the Switch version of it. I like it. Again, I love the fact it's a different concept. I like the fact it's a very different game. Being, with no Ganon basically and being on this island and the whole concept of it being a dream. I like that. And what little bit I remember of it, I enjoyed. Again, it's never actively made me angry. And it's really impressive what they were able to do. What they were able to cram into just this basically original Game Boy game is actually quite impressive. So I like it. I just need to actually go through and play all the way through it one day. And it's never actively done anything that's made me angry. Next on the list is Hyrule Warriors. Hyrule Warriors is a game I really like all the way until I don't. Like, I beat it back when it first came out, and I was replaying through it recently, and I was having a lot of fun with it, and then I progressively wasn't, to the point to where I think I got right to where you having to play as Ganon in the story mode, and I just started getting bored with it. I ended up not finishing that playthrough, but it was really fun at first, and then it just got tedious and monotonous and repetitive, and by the time I was Ganon, I was just kind of bored with it. Or Ganondorf, I should say. I was bored with it. It's a neat concept, though. And I've never played the Age of Calamity sequel, which I need to do at some point. But it's fun. I love being able to play as other characters. I love just actually being on the battlefield and taking on armies. That's really fun. I like playing as Link. I really like playing as the blue-haired girl as well. She's a lot of fun to play as. So it's fun until it's not. That's the best way I can sum up Hyrule Warriors for me. Coming in at what I believe is 8 on the list is the original Legend of Zelda. I never played the original Legend of Zelda back in the day. My very first Zelda game back in the late 80s was Zelda 2, which is probably why I'm more fond of it. I prefer Zelda 2 to Zelda 1. I think I dabbled in the original Legend of Zelda a little in the 90s. I'd finally gotten an NES cart, but you know how the save feature on that was spotty by that time, even by that time. I didn't really sit down and play through it probably until the 2000s, the early to mid 2000s. And by then, the kind of childhood allure of it had kind of worn off. And I had played better games in the series by then. It's fine. It's impressive for what it is, being an original Nintendo game to cram all that in. It's not a bad game by any means. I love the fact that it gives you this freedom to explore that you never really got again until either A Link Between Worlds or Breath of the Wild. That's really impressive. Graphically, it looks fine, especially for an NES game. The difficulty level is rough, but it's doable if you grew up in that era playing NES games. And it is easy to see where the bones are there for what has become a juggernaut franchise for Nintendo. One of their big three, I call it, between Metroid, Mario, and Zelda. So a good game, just not as much fun for me to go back to, probably because I didn't play it at a young age. Is Twilight Princess. I played Twilight Princess for the first time recently, and I liked it. It's dark, but it still feels like a PG-13 dark. I really wish it had gone like A Link to the Past dark, real dark, and actually gone dark instead of this kind of, what if you combine the Dark World with Tron look that it goes for. That doesn't quite work for me. I enjoyed the story. I like the graphics. This is probably the last Zelda game where they went for kind of realistic graphics. And even though they haven't aged as well as, say, Wind Waker or how Breath of the Wild will age well because of its design, I still like to occasionally see a realistic Zelda. And this is really the last one we got. I enjoyed the lore of it. It pretty much being a sequel to Ocarina of Time. It works really well. I like this Link. I like what Mina, whatever her name is. She's probably the best sidekick that's ever been in a Zelda game. She never really annoyed me like most of them do. I didn't really like the Wolf Link stuff, although once I adjusted to combat with him, I was fine. And once I got to where I could switch between Wolf Link and Human Link on the fly, it was fine. I love the Temple of Time dungeon and the Sacred Grove area. I love that. That's what actually got me interested in wanting to play all the way through it. I'd watched my best friend play that, and watching him step through the doorway of time and the ruins turning into the Temple of Time just blew me away. It's my favorite part of the whole game, and that's what actually got me wanting to really play through it. The tutorial is irksome and overly long. That's the reason why I'd never played this game much before. I bought it when it came out on the Wii. Hated the motion controls. It took too long for the game to get going. Tried playing it on the GameCube, which looked not too good on my HD TV. And then I finally got the Wii U definitive HD edition of it. And it still kind of sat there for a while. But finally, in 2023, I picked it up, played all the way through it. And once I finally got through the tutorial and actually started getting to the gameplay, I liked it. I like the village. I like warping around. I love exploring. It's one of my favorite parts of the Zelda games, just exploring. I like the little Beyblade thing you can ride on. The dungeons are really good. Sometimes they're frustrating. As I was playing it through it, I was like, I kept humming crap design when I was in the dungeons. But now that I'm actually through them, I can appreciate that they're actually really good dungeon designs. Some of the best dungeon designs. And some pretty insane boss battles. Like the boss battles, the dungeon battles in this are better than, say, Breath of the Wild. You have that one skull creature where you have to use the Beyblade to hit its backbone and then ride the walls to hit its head. That's a pretty intense boss battle. And then the one with the little eel underwater, I hated that one. It's innovative, and I can respect that, but God, I hated that one. That one almost had me in tears. It was so frustrating. But still, very innovative dungeons, very innovative enemies and dungeon masters. I was really impressed by that. I love the final battle with Ganon, the different various forms of it. It's a hard battle. It's a very hard battle, but it felt like the culmination of everything the game had led up to at that point. I enjoyed Twilight Princess. It's a fun game. Coming in at number 6 on the list, I believe, not even making it into the top 5, is Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time has not dated the best graphically, like especially since I tend to play the original 64 version. Graphically, it's a little rough going back to. Like, Mario 64 has never aged graphically to me just because it's very colorful and it's not supposed to look realistic. Mario games don't. Zelda, which is supposed to be a realistic look, has aged a little more rougher for me. It's a good game. I will never forget, that thrill of walking out on the Hyrule field for the first time, just being like, whoa, this is the biggest game ever. And we owe a lot to the, Ocarina of Time, like the ability to Z-target and all of that. It's a fun game. I love how it's pretty much like a 3D version to A Link to the Past, honestly, which is impressive when you think about it. Because it has, like how A Link to the Past has a light world, a dark world, this game has, the young period and the old period, the age period for Link. When he travels back 7 years, when he travels forward 7 years, so you're doing that a lot. The idea, too, of starting with Kid Link, which Link is in some games, and then moving into teenager, older Link, which is the Link in some games. I mean, both of those in one game is really creative. I like the dungeons in it. Some of them are a little frustrating, like when you're inside the big whale. I hate that board. Some of the boss fights are really creative. I don't actually remember. I haven't played through Ocarina in a very long time. God, probably 20 years, honestly. I think I've started a couple playthroughs, but I never really get through it. It's probably been 20 years since I played through it. I've never played all the way through the 3DS one, even though I own it. Um, but it's a good story. It's a great story. I love all the side quests, like getting the Bigoron sword. I was so proud when I was able to pull that off. I enjoyed the different dungeons, except for some of them, like the one with Bongo Bongo, the Shadow Temple, I hated, and the Water Temple, I hated. Yes, I'm one of those people that hated the Water Temple, especially when you're having to swap boots, and it's such a process to swap boots on the 64 version. Um, but it did have some really good boss battles. It did have some good dungeons. And the final showdown with Ganon does feel very epic. Fighting Ganondorf. I also liked kind of finding out Ganon's origins, because this is the first time we meet his human form of Ganondorf, finding out that he was originally human, basically. And I love how Ocarina of Time, even though this kind of gets ruined later, explains how he became the demon beast Ganon, and that how the Triforce of Power resurrected him, and in a form that reflected his dark heart. So he changes from Ganondorf into Ganon. And that scene is really cool. And I much prefer how the 64 version does it, where it's darker. And unlike the 3DS where they make it too light, how he's almost in shadow and silhouette, and you just see him in the lightning flashes. That works way better. It creates a much better atmosphere. And then having to fight him without the Master Sword until you get back the Master Sword. I really love that final battle in Ocarina of Time. It's a phenomenal game. There's just Zelda games I like better. Next on the list in fifth place, and this was not, I always figured this would be my favorite 3D Zelda game. I didn't think this one would ever get dethroned, even though it does. We'll get to that. But at number 5 on the list is the Wind Waker. I love the Wind Waker. That art style is gorgeous. I can never make up my mind which version I like better, the HD version or the original, because even the original version of it has aged well. I mean, if you tweak it a little bit and put it in widescreen, it would look so good on an HD TV. Like I know some of the emulators have, like the Dolphin version of it, I think looks phenomenal. The original version of it looks gorgeous. The HD version of it looks gorgeous. I think there's a little too much bloom in the daytime. It's a little too bright. And the character models for Link and Zelda look a little more 3D than cartoony at times. But the game is gorgeous. I absolutely love traveling around in this world. Again, I talked about how much I love exploring in Zelda games. I love sailing around. Now, the HD version is definitely the version I go to, because I did hate the sailing sometimes, and I love having the red sail where you don't have to worry about wind direction and it goes faster. That does make the game a lot easier. Because I didn't mind the slower sailing as much in the original version, but I did hate constantly having to change the direction of the wind. That did get monotonous and tedious. Um, so the HD version, its quality of life improvements, I do enjoy, like the faster sail, and I do like the fact it makes the Triforce quest easier, where you're not having to track down quite as many charts and spend as much money with Tingle. Because the third act of the game is a little rough. You can tell they ran out of time programming. There's less dungeons, and you have to do the fetch quest for the Triforce. And the fetch quest is annoying. I mean, even on the HD version, I find it annoying. It's not as annoying, but it's still annoying. That's probably the weakest part of the game for me, is the Triforce quest. I enjoy the dungeons that we get. I enjoy the boss battles that we get. I think the dungeons are fun. I think they're clever. I think they have some good mechanics. I know some people wish there were more of them. I think maybe one or two more would have been fine, but I wouldn't have wanted a lot more. I like the fact there's less dungeons in this game. I could spend more time exploring, finding hard upgrades, playing mini games, just checking out the various islands. Again, exploring is one of my favorite things to do in this game. I love the story. I love the lore. I love the fact this Link isn't a version of the hero of time. This is just a young boy who gets thrust into a situation and has to step up to become a hero. Well, the scene when you go underwater after beating the tower and you see Hyrule Castle frozen in time is probably one of my favorite scenes in all of The Legend of Zelda. It also has what is quite possibly the best 3D Ganon battle in all of Zelda. I love the Ganon battle here. I love this version of Ganon. You can sympathize with him in a way. You can kind of understand why he's doing what he's doing. Uh, the final battle with him is a fantastic battle, and that scene at the end when he just stabs the sword into his head and he turns to stone. That's epic. That is epic. Just boom, and he turns to stone, saying, "I can feel the wind blowing." That is epic. I absolutely love that. And then when they're underwater and the water is breaking through the cracks. It's a phenomenal set piece. I absolutely love that. I love Wind Waker. I love this version of Zelda. You got it fast.
I was already on 471 when I called you.
You what?
I was already on 471 when I called you.
Oh, man, you got it quick. Let's see. Okay, guys, I'm back. That was actually my friend Eric. I knew he was coming, but he wasn't supposed to get here quite so fast. So yeah, we ended up hanging out, spending the day together. It was 4th of July, so he wanted to get out of the house and hang out. So basically, I had wrapped up what I was saying about Wind Waker. That covered it pretty well. I absolutely love Wind Waker. So we'll move up to number 4 on the list, my favorite 3D Zelda game of all time, which is Breath of the Wild. I didn't think anything, excuse me, I didn't think anything could top Wind Waker for me. I love Wind Waker so much, but Breath of the Wild is just, that is such an amazing game. There's so much to do. And I talked about in Wind Waker how much I love just exploring that world and traveling around and seeing what's there. I mean, double that for Wind Waker. Double that for Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is so much fun just running around, exploring this Hyrule, seeing everything there is to see, unlocking the map. It took me so long to get the whole map unlocked. It took me a long time to really do a lot of the story. Once I got off the Great Plateau, I didn't really do the story much. It took me a long time before I beat any of the Divine Beasts. I just loved running around, exploring everywhere, climbing up everywhere, doing the shrines, increasing my hearts and stamina, trying to track down the Master Sword. I spent so much time doing that. And then I'd get to a spot thinking, okay, I'm at the edge of this world, and then there's this whole nother area, and I'm like, there's a whole nother area over here? There's a desert over here? There's another mountain over here? Breath of the Wild is really that game like, I wonder if I can actually go to that mountain. Yes, you can. You can go to that mountain. That is insane. I spent so much time just running around, exploring, seeing what there is to see, doing shrines. I love that. The actual story to the game is pretty good, even though the bosses and dungeons are kind of weak because all of the Divine Beasts look similar. And that electric Divine Beast is just that was a pain in the neck to do. I did not like that. That one was watched on YouTube because that is not a board that's designed to be beaten. That is a board that is designed to be watched on YouTube. And then the different versions of Ganon are too similar to each other, which got a little repetitive, even though they fight differently. And that got a little bothersome. But I enjoyed that for what it was. The final boss battle with Ganon was fine. I found the Calamity Ganon, once he starts putting that shield up, to be a little hard. But just enough to make me annoyed. And then the actual face-off against Dark Ganon I found irksome. I don't like riding on horseback in any Zelda game. So this one falls in with that. I didn't care for the horseback riding. I never really use the horses. I'll use them occasionally. Most of the time I just run around the world on foot. I just like that better. Even if it takes longer, I like that more. So I hated having to do the final battle on horseback, even if it is kind of just an interactive cutscene. It was a bit disappointing for how amazing the game is. I loved the story, though, the lore, the fact everything went to pot, 100 years ago, and seeing how devastated Hyrule is, seeing all the ruins. I had played Breath of the Wild briefly back when it first came out. I bought it on the Wii U, and I never got far into it. I didn't like a lot of the new mechanics, the weapons breaking, the having to cook food. It just didn't feel like a Zelda game. But now that I went back and gave it a chance, since I was just on a Zelda binge, having beat Twilight Princess and Wind Waker again recently, I actually really enjoyed it. The cooking aspects of it, so much fun coming up with all the different recipes and stuff. The weapons breaking make combat so much more intriguing. Even when you get the Master Sword, since it runs out of energy very, very quickly, makes fighting different. You know, which weapons do you use for which situation? You know, stocking your bows, stocking your shields, stocking your weapons, collecting the Korok seeds so you can expand your inventory. All of that just comes together really, really well. Although I love the fact once I actually bought the house and got to deck it out, I could store extra weapons at the house. Plus, having a spot I can always heal myself is really nice. There's so many side quests. I still haven't done all the side quests. I think I've done most of them. I think I've done like close to 50 of them. I've unlocked some of the others I haven't done yet, but I think I've done like around 50 of them, something like that. But yeah, it gives you this sense of freedom to play the game however you want to play the game. That's fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. I mean, Zelda hasn't been this open to what you can do with your movements probably since the original game, with the only other one coming close probably being A Link Between Worlds. So I absolutely loved Breath of the Wild. I could nitpick stuff on it, but I absolutely loved it. Easily my favorite 3D Zelda, and I love the graphical style it goes with. That kind of combination of real world proportions with that kind of Wind Waker color scheme. It works really, really well. Moving up to number 3 on my list. This one might surprise people, but I love this game so much, is The Adventure of Link, Zelda 2. I love Zelda 2, even more than Breath of the Wild. Zelda 2 is the first Zelda game I ever played. It is the Zelda game that made me fall in love with The Legend of Zelda. And I love its RPG elements, and I love its side-scrolling elements. I love its music. I have a nostalgic attachment to this game that I can't put into words. I absolutely adore it. And maybe that's one of the reasons I'm so fond of it, is I do have that childhood nostalgic attachment to it. You know, just to be honest. But it's a lot of fun. I love the towns. I know the game so well too. It's very seldom I have to go up online and look up something. Every now and then, especially in the Great Palace, because that is such a maze, I'll have to, like, if I'm doing a playthrough, I may have to look online just to remember. But for the most part, I can remember where most things are. And I love this game. Is it hard? Yes. Yes. This game is balls hard. Oh my God, it's balls hard. It is insanely difficult. And the level grinding you have to do to level up, because I level grind a lot when I'm playing this. I'll just go into a swamp somewhere and just grind and grind and grind and grind to get my points up. But I love it. I enjoy the boss battles. I love the music. I love getting the upward thrust, the downward thrust. I love walking through the maze that is Death Mountain and doing it. I love Zelda 2. I love being able to jump. The Great Palace is, oh my God, that's quite possibly the hardest palace in all of Zelda. And then fighting the Thunderbird at the end, not only is that a grueling fight, just for it to not be over and you have to fight your shadow. Oh, it's hard. It's not for everybody, but as someone who was from the 80s, who grew up with the original NES and that grueling NES difficulty level that a lot of games had on there, I've still never beat an NES Castlevania game in my life. Never. None of them. I have them, but I've never beaten them. I play them to play them, not to beat them. But Zelda 2, beating Zelda 2, I consider to be the greatest gaming accomplishment I've ever done. And I've done several. Like in Mario 64, I've done all 120 stars. Now, I have several gaming accomplishments I'm proud of. But being able to say that I've beaten Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, it took me about 20 years to do it. But being able to say that I've done that is probably my favorite gaming achievement. I take a lot of pride in it. And I love going back and replaying it. It's been a while, but I love going back and replaying it. Because I played it a bit when I was little, because I was only about 7 or 8 when it came out. And I couldn't beat it when I was a kid because it's too hard. But I played it on the Wii. I had it downloaded on the Wii. And so I beat it for the first time in probably 2007, 2008. I forget exactly. It was about 20 years. And then I also have it on my 3DS, and I've beaten it on my 3DS. Oh, it's a lot more fun to play with save states, I must say. But yeah, I love Adventure of Link. And number 2 on the list, and I can't talk about number 2 without talking about number 1. Number 2 on the list is A Link Between Worlds. I love this game. Part of it is that it very much is the sequel to A Link to the Past I've always wanted, and A Link to the Past is my favorite Zelda game of all time. It's my number one. I love A Link to the Past. So I've always wanted a sequel to A Link to the Past. And I actually got that. I remember when it was announced, I was just floored. You know, I'm in that same Hyrule from A Link to the Past, even though time has passed. The added mechanic of being able to turn into a 2D image on a wall really opens up this, adds new mechanics to it. The ability to do the dungeons in any order, while it might affect the difficulty curve of the dungeons, is a neat mechanic. It's basically a nice spin on A Link to the Past with a different graphical style. I do like the graphical style. I know it's a little kiddie, but I like it. It works for what that game is going for. I love the idea of Hyrule and Low Rule, and I love the fact that it's not just the same story as A Link to the Past. It does have a different story to where it just doesn't feel like a remake or remix of A Link to the Past. Being able to get the items in any order, to do the dungeons in any order with the rent system and eventually buying them and upgrading them. I love that. I love the ending. I love the tweaks to the dungeons, how they make them different. Like the blind battle where you have to go onto his shield and then go behind him. It's very creative and very innovative, while at the same time giving me a love letter to the Link to the Past and giving me, you know, a sequel to one of my favorite video games of all time. I've always wanted that. That was always something I dreamed about. I never thought I'd get it, you know. It's like getting Terminator 2 too. No, most people didn't necessarily want a Terminator sequel. They wanted a second Terminator 2. Give me Terminator 2 2. You know, we never really got that. So I feel like I got A Link to the Past 2, while at the same time it doesn't feel like just a remake or a remix. It feels like it's doing its own thing, enough to where it stands on its own merits too. And it's so much fun to play through. I need to actually give it another playthrough. I just don't play on my 3DS much anymore. They need to make A Link Between Worlds like available on the Switch so I can play it on the big screen. I would love to do that. Which brings me to number one on my list, which is A Link to the Past. I love A Link to the Past. I was probably 9 or 10 years old when that came out, and I played it all the time. It was one of the first games, I think. No, I can't remember. It's one of the early games I got for the Super Nintendo. And I played it a lot because I loved Adventure of Link so much. I was ready for another Zelda, and I enjoyed the top-down look of it. I love the sprite design of A Link to the Past. The sprites look so good for that game. I love the music. I love the huge contrast between the light world and the dark world. I think the dark world in A Link to the Past is the darkest Zelda's ever gotten, maybe outside of Majora's Mask, but I don't really count that because I hate Majora's Mask. But I love just how dark the dark world is. Like the Twilight Realm of Twilight Princess cannot compare to how dark the dark world looks. And the music that goes with it. The music, but different. The difference between the music of the light world and the dark world is so huge. They're just so tonally different. Whereas the light world music's very heroic and epic, the dark world music is very dangerous and deadly and evil and dark. I love that a lot. I love how similar the worlds can be, while also how totally different the light and dark worlds can be. I love that when you get the Master Sword and you fight Agamemnon or whatever his name is, I can never pronounce his name. It's so weird. You know, you think you've gotten far into the game because you've beaten 3 dungeons already. You've gone through the main castle, which is another dungeon, not even counting the dungeon at the beginning when you rescued Zelda. And you're just scratching the surface of the game. You know, you get transported to the dark world, and it's like you just finished the prologue of the game. You still have like 7 more dungeons to go. Then Ganon's Tower. Then the fight against Ganon, while collecting heart pieces and exploring both of these worlds and seeing how they influence each other. It's just, I love this game and the items in this game. And it pretty much set the template that Zelda would follow for, 25 years, basically. Basically all the way up until Breath of the Wild came out. It pretty much set the template. I mean, Ocarina of Time really is just a 3D version of A Link to the Past in a way. Just so many firsts in this game. So many fun boss battles. So many fun encounters. I love A Link to the Past. It is easily my favorite Zelda game of all time, and it also deserves a playthrough again sometime soon. I've just been through it so many times. I've beaten that game so many times. So, obviously you can tell I love 2D Zeldas. I love 3D Zeldas, but I love me some 2D Zeldas. Even if some of it is, nostalgia goggles. So I want to know what you think. What do you think of my list and how you would rank them? So comment down below and let me know. Don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button. That helps me out, and I certainly appreciate it. I also have a Patreon if you would like to support me that way. There's a link to that down in the description below. My entry-level tier is only $2 a month. I also want to give a shout out to some of my top-tier patrons, Stephen Crane, Colin Coney, and Finn Perkins. I appreciate their support, as I do the support of all of my patrons. I have a P.O. box down there as well if there's anything you'd like to send me to look at and review, Zelda-related or otherwise. And a link to my Amazon wish list is down there as well. Don't forget to check out my sci-fi channel, which is just called Another Sci-Fi Guy. I mostly talk about Doctor Who on it. And I also have a Star Wars channel called Probable 1701, if you want to check those out, if that's anything you're into. Most importantly, though, thank you for watching.